Good evening. Thanks to those of you who are tuning in. As you know, it's December 5th, which is Krampusnacht. And that's not a holiday that gets celebrated much here in England, but it seems to be catching on because honestly, it's just a lot of fun, as you'll find out. So, what I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about this evening is the background of this holiday, if you can even really call it a holiday. It's more of a tradition. And Krampus is, of course, the big hairy monster with a long tongue and nasty pointy horns. And he comes down from the mountains in the alpine regions of Austria and Germany and scares the bejeebers out of naughty little children, whacking them with birch sticks and possibly, if they're extra naughty, throwing them in his bag and carrying them off to either be eaten or to go to the bad place. So there's no real birthday for Krampus. We can't definitely say that he originated on a particular date or in any particular location. And I think that makes sense. You kind of need to look back earlier than Christianity. You will see some people, especially online, who try to make the case that Krampus is someone who's existed all the way back to, say, like Roman Saturnalia. And they're there just really isn't any evidence for anything like that. I mean, I think that if you look around at all the cultures in the world, anything that's like a polytheistic, native, indigenous religion, you're going to have belief in critters that live in the woods and are scary and are going to come and get you. Like you can even look at, say, Japan. So the spirits and gods, for lack of a better word, and the sort of creatures that inhabit Shinto legend and myth are actually not that different from some of the early indigenous European beliefs, where, say, you have like the gods, your high level gods, and then you'll have kind of like lesser deities, but then you have beings that aren't necessarily gods, but they are supernatural. And so, like in Japan, you would have creatures called yokai, which we sometimes translate as demons, but that's not exactly the right word. It's more like these supernatural animals and beings that are tied to specific places and they have specific functions, like maybe they punish wicked people or they protect a certain location. And so the idea that there's something creepy out in the woods that might get you, that's actually not that irrational because there is creepy stuff in the woods that'll get you. But then also, if you think kind of before the scientific revolution, people had to deal with the information they had. And so they would make up myths and legends using real animals or maybe sometimes even fossils that they would find of prehistoric creatures and go, oh, well, this must be this big scary critter that lives in the woods. So I think that's a more likely theory as to the origins of Krampus. And I think more when Christianity comes, so first the Romans came, and the Romans definitely did their part to wipe out the native Germanic beliefs. We really don't know very much about what they were. We know that it had something to do with groves of trees as far as the worship that they would do, but they didn't leave any writing down about their beliefs, so we don't really know. And then Christianity came, and the folk beliefs get even more washed away, or sometimes woven in with Christian tradition. And so you would have had these like indigenous gods and lesser beings that kind of get pushed to the side and they get taken over by, say, saints or other kind of supernatural creatures like ghosts or demons, but they're kind of interpreted in more of a Christian way as opposed to the old fashioned German way. But a lot of folk beliefs still lingered for a really, really long time because they were helpful. People needed a way to explain the world that they were seeing around them. And so Krampus came in. You start to see him being mentioned a little bit in the Middle Ages. But again, these mentions are really sketchy. And the few mentions we do have are like priests basically saying like, "Can you guys knock it off with this Krampus celebration because you're really trashing the town and causing a lot of trouble?" Almost like the way people complained about the old way that Halloween used to be celebrated, where, kids would go out and just trash the entire town and cause a lot of problems. And oh, before I continue, I just wanted to say hello to those of you that are online. So, Bazemore, first to arrive, welcome. So happy to see you. And NZ guy, happy to see you too. And oh, thank you so much. I hope you and your family have a wonderful Christmas as well. Thank you. That's very kind. And then, yes, this is a good point. We don't know a lot about pre-Christian holidays, and a lot of what we know comes from Christians recording things for posterity. This is true, especially when it comes to Germanic and Norse legends. So we do have, like, say, a lot of the Norse myths that got written down, but they were written down first by a guy named Snorri Sturluson. Say that 3 times fast. And he was writing it down about 200 years after the Icelanders had given up on paganism. So we don't even really know if he got it right, although we know he was trying to write it down because he had the idea of these beliefs are vanishing and we have no idea, like we better write them down or they're just going to go away. So I think in that case, there was a good faith attempt to write down the stories of what we'd call the Vikings. But even then, we don't have any record of them speaking for themselves. So, yeah, anyway. All right, great. Nice to see all of you here. Thank you for joining me this evening. Yeah, so we're kind of up to where Krampus comes into history. What can we definitely say about Krampus? Well, we know that he started being mentioned in the Middle Ages. You get a few mentions before the 1500s, but when you really start to see him come into the actual historical record in terms of printed things we can still reference is kind of the 17th, 18th century. And what you get is he ends up being partnered with Santa Claus. Now, those of you who are parents or teachers, or if you've had anything to do with children, you definitely know that there's the carrot and there's the stick. So you have to decide, how am I going to get children to behave the way that I want them to? The carrot are the positive incentives, and the stick is the disincentives. And so if you think of Krampus and Santa Claus working together, or St. Nicholas, as he used to be known, St. Nicholas is the carrot, and Krampus is quite literally the stick, or he carries literally the stick. And if you think of other traditions, like when I was studying up on Krampus here to tell you all about him, I was reminded of my own childhood back in Los Angeles, where that culture's heavily influenced by primarily Mexican, but also other Latin American traditions. And we used to hear stories about a couple of folk figures. One of them was the chupacabra, and we didn't take chupacabra very seriously, although I definitely knew older people who 100% believed he was real. Like, there was one time, a cat in our neighborhood was discovered in the morning, and it was pretty ripped up. It was in several pieces. And, like, us kids figured, well, it was coyotes or a mountain lion or something like that. But, like, the old grandma down the street was like, no, it was the chupacabra for sure. And we were like, yeah, right. Yeah, right. So we didn't take that one as seriously as far as this horrible, nasty creature that lurked around and was coming to rip things up. The one we took a little bit more seriously, because adults really managed to scare us with it, was La Llorona. And I don't know if you've heard of her. La Llorona means like the crying woman. And it's this old folk legend from Mexico about this woman who did away with her own children. And so, as punishment, she's forced to wander the earth, and she wanders weeping and wailing. And a very classic thing was, if you were like whining or refusing to go to bed, or like the sleepover party had gotten too wild, the mom would come in and be like, "If you kids don't behave, I'm gonna call La Llorona and she'll come get you." And we mostly didn't believe it, like, mostly, but I have this little window into what it must have felt like when children would hear, like, "If you're not good, Krampus is gonna come and get you," because I remember being 7 years old and being told, like, "La Llorona will come and get you if you're naughty," and I was like, well, maybe she will. I don't know. Okay, fine. I guess I'll go to bed, right? So, yeah, if you are familiar with any other folk traditions from around the world that's similar to this, like, what's the boogeyman that grown-ups in your culture made up to tell you, like, you'd better be good, or Krampus or La Llorona, like, they're gonna come and get you and take you away. So, you don't you get yeah, grown-ups would usually be joking, but once in a while, they would take it too far when they were talking about her, and so Krampus is definitely this kind of figure. We know that for at least a few hundred years, mostly young men will dress up like Krampus on December 5th, tonight. Happy Krampusnacht. And run around through the village. They would wear elaborately carved wooden masks and just kind of act like maniacs, cause a ruckus. They would go to houses and bang on the door, and the people who lived in the house would appease them with schnapps. So I imagine that in this tradition, everybody knew what was going on. I don't think I'd be hard pressed to imagine that any of the grown-ups in traditional Alpine culture believed that the young men showing up at their door actually were Krampus. I think this was more for fun and then also to scare the kids into being good. Although, if you're from Austria or Germany and you grew up with any of these traditions, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if you think any of the grown-ups where you lived actually believed that this creature existed, or if you think it was just a way to, like, blow off some steam. I mean, think about it, like, it's in the winter, you haven't got modern technology, you haven't got a way to stay in touch with people or really be entertained, the whole family's crammed in the house. You gotta imagine in that setting, people really need to blow off some steam. So, like, that's why at Christmas time, you're gonna have feasting and celebrations to sort of lift your mood and make you feel really positive. But then you're also going to need a way to release your frustration. And so I think that's why, with winter festivals in particular, you get this sense of the world gone topsy turvy. In English tradition, you would have like the Lord of Misrule and the sort of wildness between Christmas and Twelfth Night. And other cultures do the same thing because I think just, yeah, people get a little stir crazy being all pent up in the house, and so having an excuse to go out with your buddies and act a fool and demand free booze from the neighbor, and then maybe if their kids are kinda bratty, you get invited in to scare them a little bit. So I can see the appeal of that, but I don't really see a situation where people literally believed that a creature like Krampus was real. But once again, be happy to know if I'm wrong. So why is Krampusnacht on December 5th? The traditional feast day of Saint Nicholas in the Catholic liturgy is December 6th. And so, because of that, Krampusnacht would happen the night before Saint Nicholas's Day, because again, it's that carrot and stick, right? So, you'd have the traditional procession. I've seen some of them where someone dresses up as Saint Nicholas and someone else dresses up as Krampus, and they proceed around together. And so, Saint Nicholas will ask the children to say, like, recite something from scripture or recite some other poem or something that they're meant to know. And then, there's Krampus, like, no pressure, right? I can't imagine it's easy to suddenly recite when there's this like demon guy staring at you from over St. Nick's shoulder. But yeah, so St. Nicholas would leave presents in your shoes if you were good, and Krampus would whack you with birch sticks if you were bad. I'm not defending this parenting technique, by the way. Like, yeah, obviously it's outdated to freak your children out and scare them and hit them. But if you put this in its historical context where, people did believe it was okay to smack kids until quite recently. I mean, my parents told me stories about how when they were in high school, if you were naughty, the PE teacher had that big paddle with the holes drilled into it, and you'd bend over if you were bad and he'd whack you on the backside. So it wasn't even that long before I was born that it was still legal for teachers to hit kids in schools. And it's still socially acceptable in many places and in many different groups to smack your kids, even in the US. Um, I think that the science on that has shown that you should model the behavior you want to your kids, but I also don't think it's right to look back at history and be like, "Oh, they should have known better. They should have been so enlightened." Like, that was just what they did. They thought it was fine. It happened to them. And that's, yeah. So, without apologizing for history, I'm just acknowledging it. So, over time, church leaders in Austria and Germany started to feel that maybe this Krampus thing was getting a little bit out of control. And the dudes who would go on a Krampuslauf or a Krampus run would get a little out of control. So it did fall out of style for a while, but where Krampus started to come back and get popular again was when they were able to make merch out of it. And that's not that different from the history of Santa Claus, where you see in the 19th century, as soon as you can kind of like commercialize something, it becomes popular. And in the 19th century, it became really popular to send Christmas greeting cards that would say greetings from Krampus, and it would have a funny picture of Krampus like chasing some kids or smacking some kids. And these should not be taken seriously again. These should be viewed in the same way that like we view funny greeting cards now. Like you buy the nice frilly one for your mother, right? And then maybe you buy the one that makes a fart sound when you open it or something and you send it to your friend. And that's very much how people would have viewed these Krampus postcards. And you can look them up online. There's many, many different designs and they're extremely funny. And I kind of wish they printed them again. I guess you could do it yourself if you want a funny card to send to a friend this year. And then that kind of led to his big comeback. I have seen I I don't know for sure about these. I haven't been able to historically confirm this. I've seen a little bit of writing about how during the 1930s, when there was the National Socialist movement, that some people tried to use Krampus for those purposes. I haven't been able to find any primary sources that back that up. I've been able to find people writing claiming that, but I haven't seen any primary sources. So I'd be interested to know about that. If any of you know about primary sources that would indicate that Krampus was misused for bad purposes during the 30s and 40s, the way a lot of Germanic tradition was, yeah, let me know. Because a lot of things like the Norse gods and things like that were appropriated by National Socialists and misused to promote a horrible, hateful ideology. But I wasn't able to find any really hard evidence that Krampus got all caught up in that. The main reason that it's mainly thought of as an Alpine tradition, though, is that because it was so destructive, because it was so chaotic, because people were running around making messes, they were kind of able to do away with it in the cities. So the place where it survived was sort of up in the hills where, you know, there was less of a urban international influence and people were able to keep their local traditions a little better and just be like, well, we're not changing just because those dumb big city folk want to. So that's the reason why today it still mainly clings there, although it is making its way back into the cities again, just as a fun sort of dress up event for grown-ups. And it's certainly not as destructive as it used to be. And if you are participating in a Krampus run tonight, I encourage you to be safe as you howl demonically in the streets, asking your neighbors for free booze. Wanted to check back in on your comments again. Oh, okay. So here's a comment. It says, "The bully boys on my block were definitely scared of me. I wore a black nylon stocking over my face and a black fur coat with a tail. That sounds terrifying. Well done, you." Yeah, the definition shifted with the Enlightenment. That's true. No, that's true. So a lot of the ways that we define things really, really changed after the Industrial Revolution and the Scientific Revolution. So sometimes it's easy to look back at older traditions and be like, man, people in the past must have been really stupid. Like they thought a spirit lived in the river or they thought a demon caused a hurricane. But if you can imagine, what would it be like to live in a world where there's no science and you don't understand what causes natural phenomena? And so it's very easy to ascribe a personal motive in such cases. And so in a pre-scientific world, you can't really separate the gods from the world or demons or natural forces or spirits. Like all of these things were tied together. And so after the Enlightenment, after the scientific revolution, after the industrial revolution, we started to separate these things out. Like we would no longer say that, smallpox was caused by evil spirits because we now knew that it was caused by a virus, right? Things like that. So, but I also think that that's why you had this resurgence of interest in folklore in the 19th century. Like the Brothers Grimm started writing down stories at the beginning of the 1800s because they saw what was happening. Everyone was leaving the villages and going to the big cities to come and work in factories. And so you were getting this kind of homogenization of culture, and you were losing the local traditions as a lot of the young people moved away and people just became more mobile. Before that, families would stay in these tiny villages for hundreds and hundreds of years. So even when you're talking about folklore and folk traditions, you have to really, really be talking about these very particular local customs in a way that we really can't get our heads around now because so few people stay put anymore. So yeah, that's a good point about the Enlightenment. Um, I haven't done that. Let's see. The world is small now. I'm in New Zealand chatting to you in real time. In a way that is true. That is true. It's funny, the world has gotten bigger and it has gotten smaller all at once. Because yeah, you're on all the way on the other side of the world. It's summer where you are, and here I am in England with a horrific storm going on outside, and yet here you are in my living room spending a little time with me. So that's true. What a it's a funny world we live in, I think. It's funny that people think elders are stupid for believing in a spirit in a river, but Native Americans are thought to be so in touch with the world because they believe the spirit lived in the river. That's true. You can get it's a good intention mistake, but it is a mistake when people assume that indigenous beliefs of any kind, it could be Native Americans, it could be people from any part of the world, any indigenous belief like, oh, the Celts, the Shinto, the Ainu, or the Ainu, eh, just because someone is part of an indigenous culture doesn't you shouldn't put them on a pedestal and patronize them by being like, "Oh, you're so mystically in touch with nature." Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. People are individuals, and we should still treat them as such. As we wrapped up this evening, unfortunately, it's not too late for me, but it is getting later on. I was actually a little bit disappointed because I looked around online and there was a shocking lack of Krampus lore, because you all know that I like to share the oldest possible version of stories that I can find. And I couldn't find any stories or poems or songs about Krampus, just, stories of the traditions and everything. But what I thought I would do for all of you was rewrite the famous poem A Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Clark Moore, except rewrite it as "'Twas the Night Before Krampus." I'll just have a quick sip of water before I get going. And now all of you can get very comfortable and huddle under your favorite blanket so that you can cower in fear and terror as you hear the story, "'Twas the Night of Krampus." 'Twas the Nacht of Krampus, when all through the house all my offspring were stirring, annoying my spouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care. They thought that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were jumping like freaks on their beds while the effects of a sugar rush addled their heads. My frustrated man asked for a nightcap, and my frazzled brains wanted only a nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a scuffle, I sprang up to see which kids were in trouble. Away to the window I stomped in a flash, tore open the curtains, and was ready to clash. The moon was obscured and the temperature low, so a cloak of darkness hid objects below, when what to my faltering eyes did appear but a rampaging herd of rabid reindeer, driven out from the woods by unbridled fright, and I knew in that moment it was Krampus night. More rapid than lightning, this foul demon came, and he grunted and snorted and called kids by name. Now Chloe, now Phoebe, now Peter and Charlie. Oh, Ian, oh, Rupert, oh, Betsy and Carly, I'll wait on your porch. I'll climb over your wall. I'll take away, take away, take away all. As peasants before the wild wolves fly, when they meet with a troll, howl in vain to the sky, so up to the housetop this foul monster flew, for to slay all bad boys, and the naughty girls too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the stomping and stamping of each heavy hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, Krampus smashed in the door with a bound. He was covered in fur from his head to his foot, and his claws were all tarnished with sulphur and soot. A bundle of sticks he had flung on his back, and he glared about looking for someone to smack. His eyes, how they smoldered. His bright tusks, how scary. His tongue like a serpent, his eyebrows so hairy. His great slimy mouth had a frightening glow, and the scruff on his chin hung with slime all aflow. The stump of a bone he held tight in his teeth, and foul smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a rough, matted belly that shook as he pounded bad kids into jelly. He was gruesome and gruff, a right horrid old brute, and I cringed when I saw him and found myself mute. A glare of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had so much to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work. He whipped all the wicked and called me a jerk. He flicked his finger to throw snot from his nose, and grabbing a brat up the chimney he rose. He sprang toward the woods, to some girls gave a whistle, and away children ran as he poked them with thistles. But I heard him explain to the kids he had caught, Fröhliche Krampusnacht euch allen und eine gute Nacht. Thanks to all of you for joining me this evening. We can round up your comments here, and then, unfortunately, I've got to get to bed. Your cat will protect you. Round up your comments here, and then, unfortunately, I've got to get to bed. Your cat will protect you. I've met some pretty fearsome cats. I had a cat when I was a kid called Dusty, and the way we got Dusty was, we were taking out I was taking out the garbage. So I opened the front door because it's California, parents don't yell at their kids as much about leaving the front door open because it's not that cold. And this kitten just ran in the house. He just ran in. We have no idea where he came from. And he was absolutely terrified and scrawny, and he just wouldn't leave. And then, of course, it turned into, "Mommy, Daddy, please let us keep the kitten." And this cat was just the roughest, toughest scrapper. He was like a dusty gray tabby cat, and he beat up every animal on the block. Like, he would take on raccoons. He took on the big dog next door that would just run into the neighbor's house anytime he saw the cat. He did bite the dust one night in a glorious battle with a pack of coyotes, but he went out with his boots on. So I do believe that, yes, there are cats out there who could keep you safe from Krampus. Eva Craig, thank you for your compliment. That's very kind of you. I tested the poem out on my kids, and they made me correct the parts that were not funny enough. So they deserve some of the credit. Yeah. So anyway, thanks so much for joining me this evening. If you guys liked this, I was thinking maybe of tuning in next weekend to go over the history of Santa Claus and maybe rank my top favorite Santa Clauses in film. I'll put out a poll and see if anyone's interested in that. But if this seems fun to you, then maybe this is something we could do more often on weekends, where if the weather's good and I can be out by the fire pit, great. But if not, you can come and join me inside so that I don't get soaked and you can actually see what's going on. But anyway, happy Krampusnacht. I hope that if any of you are participating, please do let me know and post photos if you're sharing those publicly in any way. It would be fun to see people keeping this tradition alive. I mean, don't smack any kids for real, but go ahead and have a little bit of fun with it and share that with everyone. And I hope to see you soon in the next one. Thanks for listening.